Shabbat Shalom. When you go out to battle against your enemies. This is what the Bible says in Deuteronomy 21, verse 10. This week's Torah reading is called Tetze, the Hebrew word for when you go out. This 49th Parsha covers Deuteronomy 21, verse 10 through 25, verse 19. There are essentially 7 topics in this Parsha, Tetze, but it primarily concerns various laws. This Torah reading is controversial because atheists use it to prove that Yahweh is cruel and not at all loving. And believers use it also to prove that Torah has been abolished. So let's discuss this Tetze Torah reading and see what the Father is teaching us today. Tetze emphasizes that Torah is for all people and for all times. That Torah is for today. And today we will attempt to prove and address the main controversial issues. This Parsha is packed with commandments, 74 to be correct, and it's impossible to refute them all. So we will attempt to analyze those that may be confusing to us. Due to our lack of knowledge, because we don't take the time to understand ancient biblical culture, we often attack each other as believers on topics that can be easily explained. And it's very sad to see so many believers deceived by the enemy because they don't understand or even know what Yahweh teaches us. If we want to be followers of Torah, we must study it. A biblical commandment, as we will see later. When you go out to battle against your enemies and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands and you take them away captive and see among the captives a beautiful woman and have a desire for her and would take her as a wife for yourself, then you shall bring her home to your house and you shall shave her head and trim her nails. She shall also remove the clothes of her captivity, and shall remain in your house and mourn her father and her mother a full month. And after that you may go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. First, as mentioned, we must study Torah and view it through the lens of this specific ancient time. We must understand this verse in the context of an ancient war, with very bloody man-to-man fights, and the unfortunate fact that women were raped, killed, captured, or sold. Therefore, women began to protect themselves and their children during war by appearing as beautiful as possible, trying to stand out to the enemy to please their eyes. Because becoming a foreign woman's wife was certainly better than being raped or sold into slavery. The Gentiles, the pagans, terribly mistreated women and their children during war, without any rights. And Yahweh, through Torah, tried to give his people instructions on how to treat foreign women. Yahweh knew that it all began with lust. Men married easily, but also divorced easily. If they were no longer interested in their wife, they murdered her, or in the best way, sold her into slavery. So knowing this, looking through the lens of that time, let's look at what Yahweh's Torah commands. First, Yahweh commands to take away her beauty, to shave her head, to clip her nails, and to remove her fine clothes. And have her mourn and her slain relatives for 30 days. In other words, no more physical attraction. The man will see her crying and snotty for a month, seeing her unattractive appearance, which forces him to look beyond his original attraction to her. And then Yahweh commands, if you still want to marry her after these 30 days of unattractive appearance, you may have sex with her, but not at first. It shall be If you are not pleased with her, then you shall let her go wherever she wishes. But you shall certainly not sell her for money. You shall not mistreat her. You shall let her go is shalach in Hebrew, which means divorce. If he is no longer interested, he must treat her with respect, release her and not sell her. In other words, Yahweh is not the barbaric father that atheists claim, and Torah is not ancient but modern. Torah has extensive laws, and in this case, to protect the foreign women, a kind of welfare system. If any man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father or his mother, and when they chastise him, he will not even listen to them. And then his father and mother shall seize him and bring him out to the elders of the city at the gateway of his hometown. They shall say to the elders of his city, "This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." And then all the men of his city shall stone him to death. So you shall remove the evil from your midst, and all Israel will hear it and fear it. This is a very controversial passage in Deuteronomy, which again is used by those who oppose Yahweh or those who oppose the Mosaic law against Torah. How can you possibly stone a stubborn or rebellious boy? People ridicule the Mosaic law by saying, "If your son drinks too much, are you going to stone him?" Of course, this isn't what this Bible verse says. Only for those who focus solely on picking Bible verses out of context, instead of actually taking the time to study Torah. First of all, we must understand that this isn't about a child who puts his hand in the cookie jar and gets stones for it, but about a young adult who is a glutton and a drunkard. Glutton is salal in Hebrew, translated as an excessively greedy eater or drinker in an evil, selfish and intolerable and sinful way. Not someone who occasionally drinks a few beers too much or eats more pizza than average, but someone who endangers and shames their family. It seems to me that these parents are completely at the end of their rope. They have tried everything and see no way out with this rebellious son. I think this simply says, look, we have done everything we could do as parents, and it hasn't worked out. And now we are talking to you, and we are taking you to the community. Let them talk to you and explaining what could happen if you continue what you have done. But does this mean that we can stone such a rebellious man to death? Is there any basis, any ground for that? No, of course not. And it's interesting that there is no historical record of this ever being enforced. No Jewish court has ever enforced this law of the rebellious son. The ancient Jewish High Court states, regarding the wayward son and destroyed cities, our sages went so far as to declare that such cases never happened and never will happen. In my understanding, the stoning was merely meant to harass the son. And I'm convinced that there are parents today who would gladly subject their rebellious child to the same fate. I believe this all parallels to the parable of the prodigal son, the house of Israel, whom Yahweh scattered throughout the world. Because he was rebellious, he loved the world and he abolished Torah. Until the moment that he realized that the world had deceived him, and then he teshuvah. The final reunion of the two houses of Israel, the two sticks of Ezekiel, Israel returning to Judah, returning to the Father. If a man has committed a sin worthy of death, and he is put to death, and you hang him on the tree, his corpse shall not hang all night on the tree, but you shall surely bury him on the same day. For he who is hanged is accursed by God, so that you do not defile your land, which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance. This is another example of why people abolish Torah. Hanging is no longer for today. And I agree, no more hanging for sin. We are so blessed that there is no more sin and death. The only law, by the way, which is nailed to the cross. But unfortunately, this is what the pagans, the Gentiles, did in ancient times, hanging the guilty after their death to fear the people, so that they would not follow their example. So what does this Torah commandment teach us? And does it have a meaning for today or our future? No way! Torah is outdated. Joshua has replaced it. There's no more law, only the cross and grace. And Paul, he confirms this when he says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law, the Torah, having become a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree. Here we have another Bible verse, partly in all caps, completely taken out of context. So let's take a closer look at this verse to see what it really says. First, we must understand that there is no New Testament. When Paul quotes this from the only book he knows, the Torah, Paul quotes from Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy, the same book Paul quotes from, says much more about those who are cursed. Cursed is he who does not confirm the words of his Torah by doing them. I find this really, really interesting. It is the exact opposite of what opponents of the Torah claim. And here's another one. If you are not careful to observe all the words of this law, Torah, which are written in this book, to fear this honored and awesome name, the Lord your God. So then, the law, the Torah, is holy, and the commandments is holy, and righteous, and good. So how can Paul say the Torah is a curse when it's simultaneously holy, righteous, and good? It seems that there's nothing wrong with the Torah, but there's something wrong with people. And this is exactly what Paul teaches us 2 verses later. There's nothing wrong with Torah, there's something wrong with the flesh. But please check this for yourself. Besides, how can we as believers agree that the Torah is a curse, even though we think it has been abolished? Is the Torah really a curse? Think about it. It doesn't make sense. Paul quotes Deuteronomy 21 and says that according to Torah, we believers are all cursed. But because of this curse that the Torah mentions, Joshua died for us to redeem us from it. So let me conclude this chapter on hang him on a tree with 2 questions. Why did they bury the guilty after the hanging? And why is this passage from Torah still relevant for our future? First, they hanged people to instill fear in the people by seeing but not by saying. And I truly believe that's one of the reasons why believers today no longer fear Yahweh. We don't see judgment, we only hear judgment. However, according to Yahweh's Torah, the body must be removed and buried at sunset. Why? So that you do not defile your land, which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance. The guilty were hanging between heaven and earth, and both heaven and earth abandoned them. And here our great, great Father comes into the picture. Criminal or not, they were still created by him. Perhaps they didn't deserve heaven, but at least he gave them the respect being part of the earth. Isn't this amazing? These are the wonderful instructions, Torah, that our Father created for all of us. So why is this Torah passage about hanging on a tree still important for our future? The principle that the body must be buried after it's put to death, otherwise it will defile the land, is mentioned in the book of Revelation in reference to the two witnesses. People see this, the two witnesses, as false prophets sharing Torah, and they will both be killed and left in the streets, so that people can rejoice in their death and even send gifts to each other. Those from the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations will look at their dead bodies for 3.5 days and will not permit their dead bodies to be laid in a tomb. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and celebrate, and they will send gifts to one another, because these two prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. So who are these people? Coming from tribes, tongues, and nations. Tribes is phyle, translated as people descended from one of the 12 sons of Jacob. Tongues is glossa, translated as a member of the body. And nations is ethnos, translated as pagans, Gentiles, or non-Jews. In other words, these people who celebrate the death of the two witnesses and leave them in the street, completely contrary to Torah, are both Jewish and pagan members of the body. So could this be a group of Jewish believers who oppose Joshua and Christians who oppose Torah? Could this be the house of Israel and the house of Judah being reunited, the prodigal son? When do believers send gifts to each other? Could this be the Christmas season? I don't know. I'm just quoting and sharing what the Bible says. Let me also quote you what Joshua says in the same final book of Revelation. Blessed are those who do his commandments. Joshua doesn't say, let's abolish Torah, or the law is nailed to the cross. He says, do the law, the Torah of my Father, and fulfill it. Why? That they may have the rights to the tree of life and enter the gates into the city, the New Jerusalem. Anyway, a woman shall not wear man's clothing, nor shall a man put on a woman's clothing. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. This isn't about a woman wearing trousers or a Scottish man wearing skirts out of tradition. I would argue this is about one gender transforming into the other gender. Like, for example, a man putting on eyeliner or false eyelashes or lipstick and dressing as a woman. We see these abominations and they are strongly defended by today's school systems or our community and even many churches. Why? Because we abolished Torah. Many believers will likely agree with the extreme things that are an abomination to Yahweh. But be careful. Eating unclean food falls into the same category, normalized with an abomination. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. You shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. First, you can't plow with two different animals with different heights and strengths at the same time. They're unequally yoked and it won't work. It will go in circles, not straight ahead. And therefore I believe the children of Israel walked in circles for 40 years. A distance they could cover in 11 days, but if they walked straight ahead, of course. The ox and the donkey also represent mixing clean and unclean foods. Most believers today eat clean and unclean foods. Why? Because they have abolished Torah of the Father. Paul also elaborates on this idea. He warns us about Torah unfaithfulness, unbelievers, and do not touch the unclean, and I will welcome you. In all caps. Paul says, do not be bound together with unbelievers, for what partnership have righteousness and Torahlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? Interestingly, Paul clearly states here that those who abolish Torah are unbelievers in darkness. Bound together is heterosegio in Greek, which literally translates as unequally yoked. This could be a marriage. It could also refer to a friendship or a business relationship. We've already made a detailed video on this topic titled Do Not Muzzle the End Time Ox. You shall not wear a material mixed of wool and linen together. This shows us the same principle as the ox and the donkey, although this concerns our garment for today and the garment for the final wedding feast. So why can't we mix? Why can't we compromise Torah with what we want? If we mix linen and wool, we receive no protection from cold or heat. We remain lukewarm, just like the end-time church of Laodicea. Because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. So everything has a frequency. We have a frequency, but fabrics also have frequencies. Linen is a super fabric because it has a frequency of 5,000, just like wool. In other words, mixing wool with linen, both with a frequency of 5,000, neutralizes each other. So why is linen so important? When Joshua returns with his army of heaven, they will all be clothed in linen. When David messed up and did the shuvah, he danced before the Father in linen. Angels are clothed in linen, and the entrance to the tabernacle was made of linen. Joshua's body was wrapped in clean linen clothes. Anyway, linen is mentioned approximately 90 times in Scripture, from Genesis to Revelation. Unlawful mixing is the reason we have strayed so far from Torah. After Joshua's ascension, people began to mix Torah with pagan customs. They abandoned Shabbat and replaced it for Sunday. Passover was replaced by Easter, and the birth of the Messiah became associated with various pagan rituals centered on the sun and the winter solstice. Today, most believers are proud of this and follow and defend the pagan customs of the enemy. Anyway, if a man finds a girl, a virgin, and not engaged, seizes her and lies with her, and they are discovered, then the man who lay with her shall give to the girl's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall become his wife, because he has violated her, and he cannot divorce her all his days. This freaks people out. This is one of the main passages that atheists use to attack Yahweh. Why would I even want a God like this who allows rape and buys it off with money? But again, if we want to understand the Father's instructions, we need to study the entire chapter to see what it actually says, instead of quoting Bible verses without any knowledge. This chapter gives 5 examples of what could happen between a man and a young woman. So let's look at them one by one and see what it actually says. If a man is found lying with a married woman, then both of them shall die, the man who lay with the woman and the woman. Thus you shall purge the evil from Israel. This one isn't too difficult. It's clearly about adultery, which is forbidden in the kingdom of Yahweh. If there is a girl who is a virgin engaged to a man, and another man finds her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both out to the gate of that city, and you shall stone them to death. The girl, because he did not cry out in the city, and the man, because he has violated his neighbor's wife. Thus you shall purge the evil from among you. Here we read that the girl was engaged, betrothed, and this is considered married in Torah. And she is considered guilty, because this verse clearly says that she did not cry out. But if, in the field, the man finds a girl who is engaged and the man forces her and lies with her, then only the man who lies with her shall die. But you shall nothing do to the girl. There is no sin in the girl, worthy of death. For just a man rises against his neighbor and murders him, so is the case. When he found her in the field, the engaged girl, she cried out, but there was no one to save her. This engaged girl cried out. She is innocent, but he is guilty, so this is clearly rape. And now that tricky rape passage again. If a man finds a girl who is a virgin, who is not engaged, and seizes her and lies with her, and they are discovered, then the man who lay with her shall give to the girl's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall become his wife, because he has violated her. He cannot divorce her all his days. Here we have a girl who isn't engaged. She doesn't scream. It's not rape. And when they both are discovered, the man must pay her father and marry her, and they are not allowed to divorce. There is a parallel passage that proves that it's not rape. If a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he must pay a dowry for her to be his wife. Dowry is mahar in Hebrew, which translates as bride price paid to the parents. This refers to fornication, a premarital affair, not rape. Anyway, this version of rape is completely mistranslated because people don't take the time to study Torah and verify what the original Hebrew Bible says. Most believers would probably laugh and say, come on, this is all outdated. But this doesn't apply to Yahweh, because he's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So why is it important that we study Torah and have a good understanding of it? Sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give account for the hope that's in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. The word defense is apologia in Greek, which translates as a reasoned statement or argument. In other words, Peter is very, very clear here. If we want to follow Torah, we must understand its content in order to defend it when people challenge us. So what do we tell them? Do we have sufficient Torah knowledge to teach them, to help them? Does Yahweh deserve it that we study Torah so we can defend his word and help his household? Don't let people who summarize 1 or 2 Bible verses get away with it. Always be prepared to defend the hope that's in our hearts. Torah isn't a list of do's and don'ts, but a pact of friendship between the Creator and us. For what? For our defense, for our own good, not for his. Without Torah, without his instructions, everything turns into chaos, total destruction. And this is what we see happening all around us in the world. a total collapse of governments, wars, abuse, divorce, abortions, LGBTQ, and so on. But why? No rules. People have abolished Torah and are following their own created God. Many will probably think, that's too much for me. It takes up too much time, too much information. I have bills to pay. I have so many other things to do. Really? Is it too much time to be on your phones all day? Too much information? And the question now is, am I going to convince you all to start studying Torah tomorrow instead of using your social media? No, and I'm not going to try to. But believe me, we should. Because our social media won't take us to eternity. But Torah will. Have a blessed Torah study week. Shabbat Shalom.